Now to Capitol Hill, where Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson has unveiled his new plan to avoid a partial government shutdown by October 1st. The limited continuing resolution would fund the government until December 20th. It includes $231 million for Secret Service funding following the recent assassination attempt against Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. It was a lack of compelling evidence that was partially responsible for dooming a provision that had been in an earlier draft that Trump supported, called the SAVE Act, which would have required people to show proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote in federal elections. There's no significant evidence that non-citizens vote in the U.S., largely because it's already illegal. Speaker Johnson says this version of the bill may not be preferred, but he added, quote, shutting the government down less than 40 days from a fateful election would be an act of political malpractice. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion. Nikole, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Speaker said, there's not a Democratic Speaker, that's for sure, says that Speaker Johnson's plan is, quote, good news. What is the Democratic response? Why is it good news?
Yeah, well, obviously, in terms of Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, both of them are more or less praising this deal because they're getting what they wanted. For some time now, both of them have said that the only way to get the government funded was to do so on a bipartisan basis, and they favored a shorter-term package going through the end of the year. So again, that's basically what they got. And for the most part, this is what you would call a clean continuing resolution. So, Democrats previously had been opposed to attaching that SAVE Act. They felt that that was a poison pill, if you will, just to try to get government funding over the finish line. So now that that's out, Democrats are more likely to support this package, which again, in terms of these two leaders' hope, will be bipartisan in nature.
And a clean funding bill always has to be the case in this Congress because the two houses are split in leadership and the Speaker in the House has only a small margin. And yet, when Kevin McCarthy put through a bill with the help of Democrats, it lost him his job. How have things changed now? What's the response been to Johnson's new plan, which will require Democrats to pass?
Well, I think, rank and file members are still digesting this. One big difference between Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson, some of this was also the politics of personality. And so some, Republicans really had an issue with McCarthy's deal-making as a whole. They just felt that he wasn't necessarily an honest broker. But in terms of Mike Johnson, they have given him a little more runway and leeway, although that's not to negate that there are some genuine frustrations over how this package was negotiated and crafted, so much so that there's even some concern about whether or not this will clear the Rules Committee, because you have a number of hardliners on that committee who could easily, potentially strike this down. So earlier today, the Speaker made clear that he is talking to members, including members of the Rules Committee, to try to build consensus in order to get this package forward and over the finish line.
The Rules Committee being the hurdle before anything gets to the floor. The new deadline is now going to be December 20th, which I think this is right, is the last day of Congress. So what kind of dynamic does that set up, Nikole? It's the very last day, and they got to go through this whole rigmarole again.
Yeah, well, I wish I could take you inside of that Rules Committee meeting that was happening tonight, John, because there was one member of that panel, one of those more conservative lawmakers I was talking about, Tom Massey, who gave this really soliloquy, if you will, about this process. He's one of those who is turned off by how this whole thing is going down. And he talked about for the better part of a decade now how, you get to this Christmas deadline and that, whoever is in charge at that time will come in and try to twist arms to get a vote, saying, the only way you can go home is if you vote for this package if you want to spend time with your kids to unwrap presents. So, he is saying that he basically sees the same scenario playing out again this year by running this date all the way up to the holidays. And even though Speaker Johnson and his team have made clear they don't want a Christmas omnibus, they don't want this to be an issue going into the holidays, what Tom Massey is saying, this is the same warmed over, baked over stuff that we keep getting. So that's why he's dissatisfied with this process. But there are going to be a lot of unresolved issues that have to be addressed by that next funding deadline if this measure clears, whether that's additional aid, disaster relief aid, more funding for the VA, more funding to deal, for instance, with the bridge that collapsed earlier this year in Maryland. There are going to be a lot of things on the wish list come the upcoming holidays, again, if this package clears. So we'll have to see how things play out. But certainly it's not out of the realm of possibility that we may have to adjust our calendars accordingly as we get closer to the end of the year.
That's right. Well, we'll be talking about all of this around the holidays. Thank you so much, Nikole Killion from Washington. Thanks, Nikole.
You bet.